Hello? Hello?
Please stop. Oh, God.
Why are you doing this?
Let me finish. I know you're there, Mr. Billy. You're answering this, Billy.
For God's sake, what are you doing?
I know what you did, Billy. Filthy Billy. Billy! Billy! Billy!
Scared the hell out of me, and it scared me for years, and I still can't watch it without getting a little frightened.
My grandmother, when I was a little boy, and I remember her telling me specifically about a movie called Black Christmas and how terrified she was, and she had never seen a movie in her life as frightening as Black Christmas. Warning me about this, there was this taboo movie that I wasn't allowed to see.
I didn't think it would ever see the light of day. It was a movie I didn't think anybody'd see.
Elvis Presley used to watch it every Christmas, and the Presley family to this day still watch it. Priscilla and Lisa Marie watch it every year.
I just can't believe how much I was blown away. I thought it was gonna be really old feeling, you know, but like, God, it felt so modern.
I can really see now why John Carpenter was so inspired by this movie.
You can see certain elements and tropes of the genre being formed before your eyes.
Anything else which kind of followed, in a lot of respects, was kind of redundant.
This is easily one of the most underrated and one of the greatest horror films ever made.
Black Christmas is a 1974 Canadian horror movie that's considered by some people to be the very first example of what was later called the slasher movie genre. But I don't know how that could possibly be, since Halloween was the first slasher movie and absolutely nothing came before it.
After Hitchcock kickstarted the slasher genre with his OG masterpiece Psycho in 1960, many people have come to associate the genre's popularity and influence with John Carpenter's Halloween. And sure, while Halloween helped propel the genre to widespread notoriety, what many people don't realize is that it actually loses much of its originality when put up against a very similar seasonal slasher that emerged only a few years before it.
This is the movie I consider to be the first slasher film.
Name the movie that started the slasher craze. Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Last House on the Left, or Psycho?
Psycho!
None of the above. Peeping Tom, 1960, directed by Michael Powell. First movie to ever put the audience in the killer's POV.
Psycho has never felt like a slasher film to me. Peeping Tom comes close, but this is the movie I consider
the first. That always comes with a need for nuance. It's impossible to overlook the influences from Italian giallo, particularly from the works of Mario Bava or Dario Argento's The Bird with the Crystal Plumage.
Black Christmas may not have been the first to invent all these different elements. It was the first to take all the ingredients and throw it into one. Then Halloween came along in 1978 and adopted the same formula. Then everybody else ripped off Halloween and the slasher genre was born.
A killer in the house terrorizing women. You've got a group of people who are being picked off one by one. The point of view of the killer shots, which of course was incorporated by John Carpenter in Halloween.
As much as this film will be influential in establishing the North American slasher genre, it's also interesting to note how it distances itself from a lot of the tropes that will come after it.
It feels like you're like, wait, this isn't following all the rules, but it kind of came before the rules are set. It feels like a very fresh slasher movie.
And it's surprising how fresh it does still feel.
The premise of the original Black Christmas is delightfully uncomplicated.
It's Christmas break and a group of sorority sisters are celebrating with a festive party. Little do they know that a murderous intruder has slipped into the house unnoticed. Shortly after, an obscene phone call sets the women on edge. It's from a man named Billy. This event sends into motion a string of grisly murders.
Black Christmas was written by Canadian Roy Moore, and his inspiration for writing the script was an urban legend known as the Babysitter Killer, which is a legend of a deranged killer making menacing phone calls to his victims while being in the very same house without them knowing. Moore also claims that the story was influenced by real strangulation killings that took place over the holiday season in Montreal in the late 60s and early 70s.
1970. In Montreal, Quebec, 4 women have been strangled to death in their apartments. At least 2 of them were left with distinct bite marks on their bodies. Police believe one man is behind the crime spree, a smooth-talking psychopath referred to as the Vampire Killer, or Strangler Bill.
Billy?
News that a charismatic serial killer is on the loose fuels panic across the city.
The media was fixated on Bill. There was this fear on the part of women going to bars and meeting anybody, especially if the guy's name was Bill. If you said your name was Bill at a bar, you didn't have a hope in hell.
That turned into a script called Stop Me. More hoping to make the film, just sent out hundreds of copies of the script to every production house they could find. The script got to Bob Clark.
Clark immigrated to Canada in 1972. He began adapting a script by young screenwriter Roy Moore. The film would go on to become one of Canada's few films to obtain cult status internationally.
Clark really took it and made enough changes to it that it really came out something quite different.
They rewrote it as a sorority house story.
British actress Olivia Hussey leads the cast as Jess, while 2001: A Space Odyssey's Keir Dullea fills the role of her high-strung boyfriend Peter, a likely suspect in the killing spree.
Margot Kidder had been in Sisters the previous year, which hadn't made her famous exactly. She wasn't Lois Lane yet.
Margot was wonderful, and Canadian, of course.
I was attracted to her because she was wild and out of control, not the conventional leading lady, which was always the boring part.
Future SCTV icon Andrea Martin was cast for the part of Phyllis after comedian Gilda Radner had to withdraw from the project.
And then there's Lieutenant Ken Fuller, played by character actor John Saxon, a whole decade before playing one of his most recognized roles, another police lieutenant in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
A good example of why the film feels so modern is the character of Jess and her pregnancy, and she's planning an abortion, and her boyfriend's upset about this.
You're talking about killing a baby as though you were having a wart removed.
And she actually tells her boyfriend that she's not going to marry him because she's pregnant. Shocking material at the time, and it's really progressive.
I told you about some of the things that I wanted to do. I still want to do those things. You can't ask me to drop everything I've been working for and give up all my ambitions because your plans have changed. Be realistic.
Here's a character that in most horror films would be dead within the first scene. I mean, she would have been the first to go. She's having sex out of wedlock. It's the hero of the film. She's a strong, independent character, and I think that still speaks 40 years later to what audiences want to see.
One of the prominent slasher tropes is that characters consuming alcohol, drugs, or engaging in promiscuous sex are doomed to meet horrible deaths at the hands of the killer, while the final girl is generally responsible, virgin.
I know a professional virgin when I see one.
I guess we know who the final girl's gonna be.
In Black Christmas, however, the character that in many later iterations would have most likely been our heroine is brutally dispatched within the first few minutes.
And once again, slasher movies totally didn't exist before Halloween.
Claude? Is that you, Puss?
It's gonna be a fake out.
Who is that?
It's not your cat. Run.
Who is that? Who is it?
The virgin's going first?
Iconic as hell. Just a suffocation.
There's a reason why it's the cover of that movie.
Throughout the rest of the movie, she is sitting in a rocking chair in the attic.
It's very macabre because she sits there the entire film in the attic and no one is the wiser.
And Billy just talks to her even.
The killer, Billy. Holy shit, this guy's scary.
He would call these girls in the house, and from the first words that came out of his mouth, you could tell that this was a psychopath, a completely deranged lunatic.
One of the most memorable aspects of Black Christmas is the chilling phone calls of the killer Billy.
It's been parodied all the way up to Scream.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
The lewd, nonsensical calls feature expletives that would make even today's censors blush.
I'm not really sure that we can actually include this because of YouTube's community guidelines.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
Not bad. Oh, the voice.
Calls are just off the wall. One of the best things about this film.
What your mother and I must go in.
God, he's creepy.
I know, he is creepy.
From the very first phone call, just the noises that this guy makes while he's talking literally chill you down to your bone.
A guy named Nick Mancuso. Nick did the main voice of Billy by being like upside down on his head.
I wanted to compress the thorax, go into some kind of trance state and start making sounds and...
Could that be one person?
At some point, the police start trying to track the calls, and you hear something that changes film history.
The caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house.
This becomes so infamous and is used in many other films.
Most people think of the classic When a Stranger Calls, starring Carol Kane. That came out in the late 70s. This was the first movie to do that trope.
This is the first film where that line is used, and I'm sure that it was so scary.
The one thing about Billy that is handled so perfectly is you never see him through the whole movie.
Despite never being shown, Billy is the scariest slasher villain in my opinion. In fact, him never being shown is why he's so scary.
You only see bits and pieces and shadows of him. You see maybe an eyeball, which is one of the most iconic scenes I've ever seen in a slasher movie.
It's me, Billy. Don't you tell what we did.
Jess finds herself the sole survivor trying to escape the killer by hiding in the basement. Along comes Peter with convenient timing.
That's so scary.
Oh, it's Peter! It's Peter! Why would you know? You wouldn't know she's in the basement.
That bastard! It was him! It was him! Because how does he know Jess is in the basement?
Kicks the window open and creeps in. She's like, I knew it! I knew it was Peter.
And Peter was creeping behind the tree outside the sorority house.
Maybe it is Peter. I don't know, because how else would he know?
Yeah, it's weird that he thought she was in the basement.
But wait a second. John Carpenter saw this movie and wanted to continue on the story. So if we know it's Peter, then who is Michael, even though they might not be the exact same character?
We cut to the police's perspective where Jess has caved Peter's head in with a fire poker. Everyone at this point just assumes Peter is the killer.
I knew it in my gut it was that kid. Why would Peter start killing people? I don't know.
In a twist that I am ashamed to admit caught me off guard, Jess and the police think her boyfriend Peter was behind the calls and the murders. And why not? The guy was f***ing crazy. But Peter is defeated. Jess is recovering asleep in bed. Everything calms down. We're just waiting for the credits now. But they never come.
Oh no. My heart was beating as they're panning to the rooms.
The camera moves along the dark halls and bloodstained rooms. A frosty wind howls outside. All else is quiet. Until floorboards begin to creak.
And then you start hearing him and I'm like, oh no, oh no.
Billy the killer up in the attic. Still alive, still unseen, quietly singing to himself.
Agnes, it's me, Billy.
We slowly move outside, lingering on this dark, twisted version of what should be a comforting Christmas time image. Throughout the film, the phone calls would indicate another murder.
And then the phone starts to ring. The end. At least the end of this movie. You could argue it was the beginning of the slasher genre, which is pretty cool.
Now that's how you end a f***ing horror film. Never truly revealing Billy is one of the film's greatest attributes.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
It ended, credits ran, and I was like, that was a work of art. I loved that.
I'm sitting in the other room and I go, yes!
The fact that there is an open ending, that the killer isn't caught, that it could easily go on, it is rewarding.
I was getting ready to say that I liked this better than Halloween, and then this was the ending.
Halloween is quite openly a loose sequel to Black Christmas.
John Carpenter had asked Bob Clark, are you going to make another Black Christmas? You know, that's one of my favorite films. And he said, no, I don't think I really want to. John Carpenter said, well, if you were going to make it, what would you do?
It'll be he was captured. After all, he was put in an institution. And the movie will begin the night he escapes. They don't know it yet, and I'm going to call it Halloween.
John Carpenter took that and ran with it.
Well, then that, almost in some kind of neat, weird, alternate universe sort of way, puts like Halloween as almost like an unofficial kind of sequel to Black Christmas. And then there are those that kind of dive deep into it. Well, what does it mean? Is Michael really Billy, or is he related to Billy? Or maybe, you know, it's fun to speculate. There are a number of people out there that believe they can see a face in the knuckles of the fist on the original Halloween poster. This is kind of interesting because it fits so well. Probably the most iconic image, the woman in the attic that has the bag over her head. Well, that looks almost identical when you look at the veins. You could make an argument and say those are the wrinkles of the bag, paying homage to the original film in the series. I'm just having fun. This is just fun speculation.
The movie Halloween needed a scary face.
My assignment then was to go out and find a blank-faced mask that makes you feel eerie. We picked out a blank-faced William Shatner mask.
A death mask of me. It had been made on Star Trek. So they used my mask to terrify everybody.
You're Canadian?
I'm sort of proud of the idea that I'm Canadian.
That's where I'm from.
Montréal?
Montréal.
Do you speak French?
Oh, c'est bien, oui, je parle français. Avec un accent canadien, je suis canadien.
And we contribute a great deal to the American culture, and we're part of the American culture, although we're uniquely Canadian.
Similar to many Canadian films of the time, an effort was made to disguise the Canadian locale in hopes of increasing the film's box office potential.
The one scene in the police station where there's a little American flag on the desk, and people laugh out loud when they see that if they're Canadians, because they look at the film and it's ridiculously Canadian. They don't buy into the American flag business for a second.
Something tells me this isn't the United States.
You stupid son of a bitch, you got a big goddamn mouth. I want to know why nothing's being done about Claire Harrison.
You're a friend of Claire Harrison?
Yeah, I've been taking her out.
I mean, we've searched for her all over the house, under the couch. We can't figure out what this is all about.
It clearly takes place in Canada. I mean, there's a king can of 50 being drunk by Margot Kidder at one point.
There is a hockey game.
Turns out Jason Voorhees isn't the only guy in a slasher movie that wears a hockey mask.
It was quite a surprise to me when I realized after having watched it, my film, Bloody Valentine, was actually kind of inspired. A very interesting and little-known fact about Black Christmas was that its original title was called Stop Me. That made me stop and think, would we have had all these holiday-related horror movies?
Since then, they must have taken every holiday in existence and made a horror film out of it. Valentine's Day, April Fool's Day, Easter, even Memorial Day.
Would it have been called My Bloody Valentine, or would it have been its original title, The Secret?
When Black Christmas came out, like about 4 years later, it had a TV premiere, and there's a lot of controversy around when it came out. 2 weeks before, there were these sorority house murders that ended up being committed by Ted Bundy. Local stations kind of refused to show it. Kind of set off this sort of true crime mixed with horror movies, slasher craze that would follow.
It's a classic case of life imitating art, imitating life.
Ultimately, Black Christmas was unsuccessful at the US box office, being released alongside films like Godfather Part 2 and The Man with the Golden Gun. Richard Noel breaks down how the film industry works in cycles. You have pioneers, speculators, trailblazers, and cash-ins. The pioneer film being the movie that invents a lot of the tropes and much of the genre, but fails to make much of an impact at the box office. A lot of other filmmakers, seeing the potential, speculate on that formula and try and make it their own. And if one of them happens to be a hit at the box office, it becomes the trailblazer, the one that inspires the entirety of the industry to produce films that are similar and cash in on the trailblazer's success.
It's a film that just continues to hold up.
I still have tons of people coming up and asking for autographs for Black Christmas stuff. It's amazing to me.
Even though it was great fun to make, that I thought would last this long. Nothing's astonished me more.
I'm actually quite delighted to be sitting here 40 years on. I was actually sitting here doing one of these 25 years on.
It has a huge fan base. Once a year or something, every Christmas, they show it at these movie theaters, and I was shocked at how many people love this film. I remember meeting Steve Martin for this picture, Roxanne, a long time ago, and he said, "You were in one of my favorite films of all time." And I said, "Oh, Romeo and Juliet?" And he said, "No, Black Christmas. I loved it. Saw it 27 times.
Quentin Tarantino actually had a private reel of Black Christmas.
I feel like Brian De Palma, this definitely had to have influenced him with a lot of his films, especially thinking about Carrie, of just some of those rack focus shots. It's a little blurry in the background, but you're focusing on the person that's in the foreground.
It's a classic, and it's a classic for a reason.
While Black Christmas may not quite be as famous, this helped to shape horror movies as we know them today. And for that, Black Christmas deserves to be considered both a horror and Christmas classic. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Oh, 1 second. Hello? Billy. No, this is James. There's no Billy here. No, it's James. No, it's all right, man. You just got the wrong number. It happens to everyone, all right? All right, have a good one. Nice guy.